You're listening to The New Paris. I'm your host, Lindsay Tremuta. What does it take in Paris today to run a successful restaurant, or several of them, in a city that's so full of them? Josh Fontaine, who's the co-founder of Candelaria, Mary Celeste, and the newly opened A la Renaissance, knows a little something about it. He joins me today to talk about what's changed in the restaurant business since COVID, the proliferation of concept-driven restaurants, creating longevity, and some of the details he's most proud of at his new restaurant. Josh, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Do you know how long it's been?
I know exactly how long it's been. 643 days.
What? That's not accurate, is it?
I don't think so.
However, it was during COVID when we last recorded together. And it was because we were stuck at home.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about the impact of COVID and how you were adjusting your business. So now we are a good few years out from that mess. How is business?
Business is good. It's different than what it was during COVID because at that time I had more businesses and more employees and more things to deal with.
This is true. You had Les Grands Verts still, right?
Yeah. And Hero.
And I couldn't remember when it closed.
I was about the same time.
And Glass?
Glass was right before.
Okay.
So Glass didn't get affected by COVID. But yes, getting through COVID and getting through those problems associated with those places and COVID and all the rest was very time consuming and difficult. But now we're out the other side and, obviously I think a lot of people saw post-COVID explosion kind of thing, which was...
In business, you mean?
In business, yeah, which was good. And now what we're seeing, as obviously I'm sure you know, a lot of places not being able to sustain the repayment of their COVID loans.
I've heard.
Which, unlike the US, which were forgiven everywhere and was just free money, in France...
It was forgiven everywhere?
I think so.
I mean, someone's going to fact check that, as in someone who's listening will probably fact check that.
At least in New York, they were forgiven.
Okay. Maybe it was a New York specific.
As far as I know, I think they were kind of forgiven because those were federal loans, right? So I think a lot of them were forgiven. And so there's not this extra monthly payment to pay. And I think those loans also maybe falsely supported businesses that would have gone out of business anyway earlier, but now they have to pay that back, plus their regular bank loans, plus whatever situation they're in, investors or otherwise, and then it's just become a little bit heavy. So there are a lot of closures, certainly, but there's also a lot of things opening, as usual, all the time. I
did hear that the daily rate of closures right now had gone up in the last 6 months, from 5 to 25 or something.
Yeah, and we're certainly, not in the heart of it being in Paris because Paris is busier than anywhere else.
But this
in the
was
country.
Specific to Paris. I was wondering actually what you thought the biggest challenges are today for businesses like yours. I think everyone looks at Paris as having kind of handled the pandemic experience more smoothly than other places and then recovered because obviously there was this revenge traveling, and so Paris was full of people, and it has been kind of nonstop. But that doesn't necessarily translate to sustained growth in food and retail.
Certainly not. And there was, a lot of people were betting on the Olympics to bring in a ton of money, which didn't really happen. And I think what you saw in places like London, post-Olympic bumps or whatever, I don't really feel like that's a thing.
But that's also because your businesses are in, Candelaria and Mary Celeste are in the Marais.
Yeah, but just even talking to other people, I'm on restaurateur WhatsApp groups, and you see how people complain about things and the problems that they have and all the rest. It just depends what kind of business you're trying to run and what kind of restaurant company you have. If you're kind of, there's definitely been this explosion of concept-y restaurants and things like that. And It's like HEC restaurants, they call it, or whatever.
For people who don't know what HEC is, explain what you mean by this. It's like business school
like
grads.
Business school restaurant groups, which, is fine. It's just like different than a traditional parcours of somebody that would, open a restaurant, I think, where generally you would either come from a family that owned restaurants or had worked on and off in restaurants for a long time, or bars or whatever. And then you decide to open your own place, which obviously is like still happens. But then you have, also a group of people that have never worked in a restaurant or very little worked in a restaurant, and then they want to, or they do open, restaurants, that are generally large, loud in terms of like volume, but also in terms of like presence.
And very designy.
Very designy. It definitely goes hand in hand with this. Both things go hand in hand with the rise of like social media and how to fill your restaurant, and the rise of like trend following for a certain product or a certain ice cream flavor or whatever, chocolate flavor. So like customers want to see like that flashy thing that they can take pictures of and repost. And so like obviously the restaurateur is responding to that with crazy decor, crazy food, in your face, like always like a lot of social media presence. But, the fact that you do have these business school restaurant groups opening is also a result of the fact that there's not really, also just with the rise of technology in general, there's not really anything else to open, because retail, like storefront.
Oh, you mean so other types of businesses?
Yeah, like no one's like graduating from HEC and wanting to open a bookstore or a music shop.
Ain't that the truth?
Or like a sock store or whatever. All they want to do is open restaurants. So you have this like multiplication of either people that want to do that, and they also have the connections and, the financial wherewithal to be able to do these like big groups, like all of a sudden out of nowhere. But you also see just like small shops serving, mono product Madeleine, or...
Those have faded though. I think that was a mud.
Donuts and all this stuff. I feel like you see all these things all over the place, just like a mono product or just a shop that's like ultra branded, and people are going for it, which is fine. But that's also just because what else are you going to do? You're not going to sell anything that is sold on Amazon. You're not going to sell any books. You're not going to sell any music.
And
you're not
God forbid they come up with a business
else,
that helps the world.
No. But if you want to open like a brick and mortar shop, like,
right.
And that's why there's like also this explosion of restaurants, because you see it with like coffee shops.
Oh,
it's
God.
like an epidemic. We're on the same street. Like before, you're like, okay, this coffee shop in this area is cool. This coffee shop in this area is fine. But now you have like 4 in the same block or whatever, and it's obviously unsustainable. There's going to be a lot of, closures, I think, with that. Same thing with like cavistes. I don't know how many cave à vin nature Paris needs, but it's definitely not as many as there are.
That's
and
so
it's also
interesting.
because the barriers to entry for these kind of businesses are so small, because generally in Paris the rent is fairly cheap compared to other places, depending on where you are. But relatively cheap. You don't need any kind of special license. You don't need any extraction system.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just sign a lease, break everything, and do it yourself, and like open a cave in a couple weeks.
Right.
It's not that difficult. But that's also the reason why like everybody that's ever worked in wine doesn't need to open a cave, and every barista doesn't need to open their own coffee shop. But when I'm just like being an old man complaining, because obviously I just opened a restaurant, so it's like fine, but whatever.
But here's the difference. Here's what I'm hearing is the difference is you have put in the work and the years, and you have scaled back in terms of the number of places you've run. You've switched gears, and you've been able to acknowledge when some things weren't working anymore or to the level you wanted them to. And then you shifted gears, and for couple years you've been very concentrated on the first 2 that are still kicking, that we love.
First and third.
Oh, first and third. Wait, which was the second?
Glass.
I didn't remember that Glass was actually between the 2. Okay. Well, given that I'm not a huge drinker and into dive bars,
right?
I was not a big fan. I was not there very often,
no.
but I've been at the others. But in the meantime, you also did something that I think some of your peers in wine and in spirits have not chosen to do, which is launch your own spirit.
Right.
So you launched like 2 years ago now, right? Or a year and a half ago, Lutèce, which is available at all the best places in Paris, hotels, restaurants, bars. Yes. It's sold in shops too, so you can bring it home. Why did you go that route?
The original impetus for Lutèce was seeing that France has a big aperitif culture, and it has a lot of heritage brands like Dubonnet and Bonal and Suze and Salers and Saint Raphael and on and on and on. But most French people, and certainly most foreigners that are not in the industry, don't really know about or drink these brands. And at the same time, Italy also has a big aperitif culture and has very strong brands that everybody knows and everybody loves worldwide. And I just thought that was, unusual that even in a country like France that has its own culture, that on every terrace, everyone's drinking big Italian brands. So the idea was to kind of slightly modernize and touch up the French aperitif culture with an aperitif that is a little bit more of the moment in terms of how it's made. And
how is it made?
Just with all natural ingredients, real plants, herbs, no artificial colors or flavors or anything like that. Lower sugar, recycled bottle, recycled label, all this other stuff. So a little bit more conscious what I would, what people around me think of as things that they look for in what they consume these days. And also the fact that Paris itself didn't have, its own iconic aperitif like Marseille might have pastis.
Pastis, right. Because Lutèce is named for
Paris.
The city of Paris.
Right. The idea of Lutèce is to have, Paris have its own aperitif and to have people drinking something other than an Aperol Spritz when they're sitting on the terrace in Parisian cafes. Probably not the best timing to launch that. Worldwide trends or at least in the Western world of drinking are, going down.
But it seems like there's
but all these things
more data.
Are cyclical as well.
And also, isn't there more data about people drinking less beer and wine, but not necessarily cocktails?
Yeah, cocktails are staying pretty strong. But there was like this trend towards what they call premiumization for a long time in the spirits industry. And like a lot of the bigger companies were just kind of offloading any small brands that were like kind of supermarket vodkas or like down market things, and putting all their money into promoting kind of premium and super premium booze. That trend has kind of stopped and is reversing a little bit as you have this global anxiety,
finances
war, famine,
all of those big issues.
Yes, finances, no French government, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, we should add a little bit of an alert that we're recording on the day that our prime minister resigned after having named a government just last night.
12 hours later.
So we're in a great spot. But Lutèce is really interesting, and I know that when I lead tours, people are really interested in trying it because it's not something you can currently get everywhere under the sun.
No. It's just France, UK, Denmark, and Sweden at the moment.
And originally you were looking to bring that to the US. Is that on hold?
It's on hold at the moment, certainly. Yeah.
For obvious reasons?
Yeah. Tariffs, etc., but also just not the right time. It's better to do it on more of like a positive upswing, I think, but you can't really predict that either. So Lutèce has taken a bit of a backseat while we open the Renaissance, but it's still kicking along, and you can still find it in plenty of bars and restaurants and hotels.
And you can get it
Paris.
for home.
And you can get it at home.
Home
order
use.
it on Maison de Whisky website, for example.
But this, as you were starting to say, at a Renaissance, so this is what I really want to also get to, because your trajectory has been with Karina, your business partner, has been very interesting. You've really disrupted the food scene and the bar scene here. Both of you have been here from a time when, specialty cocktails and creative dishes were did not have great prominence and were laggards in the sort of global scene. And then you put them on the map. And now, à la Renaissance, at Place Voltaire, or off of it, is kind of a throwback. I mean, it is a throwback. You're reviving something wonderfully old and beloved in the neighborhood. And one of the things you said to me that didn't make my story for tea, unfortunately, even though I wanted it to, was I really liked what you said to me, and I hope you'll say it again right now. So please, remember exactly what you told me.
Yes.
About why there's this shift in what you want to be doing what you want to be running as a business.
I think it's a reflection of where we are in our lives and in our career, but also as a reaction of what we were talking about earlier, of the brandification of the restaurant scene. Whereas before we were kind of always looking to like do something new and add something and find like a gap in the market and be inspired by this, that, and the other, and then try to like maybe bring it to France, which something you can understand maybe when you're not a native Parisian. But at this point in our career, we're kind of over that kind of thing. And in any case, as we said, the rate of like openings and the internationalization of the Paris kind of F&B scene, there's not really like every global trend or any kind of like niche product is already like here or on its way. And I'm less interested in kind of following trends or trying to open like the next new thing that no one's ever heard of anymore, which might have been the case with Candelaria at the time, or when we opened Hero, and we're doing like the Korean fried chicken thing with our chef, and that had worked in Korea and seen that firsthand. But we opened Hero, but then there's also like 10 other places like that are still around today. So it's kind of, that's not really our niche anymore, but also we're not super interested in that, and I'm trying to like build more long-term businesses, build things that are institutions
in their own right. Yeah,
in their own right. And that's wasn't what we were trying to do with Candelaria and Mary Celeste when we opened them, but it's kind of just happened by circumstance and timing and luck. Certainly with those two places, it seems like they're both going strong after about 15 years. So like with those places, after COVID, like what we said was we were trying to like, okay, trim the fat of the places that were like taking up a lot of our time but weren't necessarily like successful financially or otherwise, offload those, recenter ourselves, focus on the two places that were successful, try to make them more successful, both by reinvesting in the infrastructure of the place, reinvesting in the teams, refocusing on the details that maybe because we were moving a little bit quickly before that maybe we've overlooked. So going back and going over the bathrooms or the kitchen or, the facade or all these things that we could have tried to improve like 5 or 10% better in all the areas. So with La Renaissance, it's a completely different situation where we're taking over new business, which is the first time we've ever taken over an existing business, but kept the name, the general vibe, the layout, and just tried to kind of do the same to La Renaissance, what we've been doing to Mary Celeste and Candelaria over the past 3-4 years, which is, give it a big refresh in terms of decor.
But it's still recognizable as an older world.
Yeah,
spot.
Certainly. Yeah. And we kept like the same layout of the room. We kept the same banquets. We kept, the same guy that made them originally, like took them out, reupholstered them, fixed like the rips and tears, and then just brought them back. A lot of the marble and mirrors and all that is original. The mosaic floor is original, but we just, had someone come in and restore that and fix like the holes and the missing tiles. The bar is exactly where the bar used to be, in the same kind of S-shaped, like slight S-shape that it used to be, which is not great for economically. It's not the best thing to do when you're trying to like rebuild the bar stations and all the rest, because it's a lot easier just to work in a straight line. But we decided to keep that because it adds a lot of charm and, and it's much more beautiful in the long run. So the idea was just to give it a big refresh, kind of restore it to its original grandeur. I don't know if it's grandeur, but elegance or, bring out its natural beauty while respecting the history of the space. And also just do the same in terms of food and drink, of course, as well.
Upgrade it.
Yeah.
And if you guys hadn't taken it over, like let's say you had lost out to someone else, do you think that every other interested party would have taken over the existing business, or would they have said that's in the past, that's an old chapter, and now we're moving on with a new concept?
From what it seemed like is that, the woman that sold it to us, Regine, who ran it for the past 35 years, she's also the owner of the walls of the space, the actual real estate. And the restaurant was for sale at one point. Someone signed a preliminary deal, but then didn't get the financing for it. So then she took it off the market, and then it kind of went back on the market. So I thought it was already sold. I'd heard echoes of it a year or two ago. When it came back on the market, we were kind of slowly looking around for a new project, but nothing that was, we weren't urgently needing to do something. And I wasn't necessarily looking the 11th because there's a lot of, it's quite dense already.
Mm-hmm.
But when the agent showed me that, I was like, oh yeah, I know that place, and it's very special, and there's definitely something to be done there. And I think that Regine would, from what it seemed like, she wasn't talking to just anyone. She wanted to really kind of almost interview the person taking over to make sure that legacy was preserved or improved upon, and not just, it's a restaurant with a full liquor license and a full extraction system and a terrace, so you could easily just break everything and rip it down and rebuild it, but have all those things that restaurant people look for when they're opening a restaurant. So it could easily be anything. But
the neighbors would have been really...
Oh, yeah.
The neighbors love this place.
Yeah, and the last descendant of the family that sold it to Regine, as far as I know, the last living descendant is in the building still.
Oh, wow.
And lives on the 6th floor. And she's come down, and she has 3 or 4 old photos that she showed us of her parents behind the bar in the 1950s, her mother and with the old coffee machine with the 3 giant urns and things like that. So we have some people coming in that say they were big regulars, and they're they don't even recognize that we did anything.
So good.
They're
yeah.
They're oh, you didn't change it. I'm well,
we did.
Cost a pretty penny not to change anything, but yes, we did. So I like that also, that it looks and then other people come in that, are regulars, and oh yeah, this space needed this, and you guys really just upgraded, and that's a testament to Joanna's work, who worked with us on it, and also the team that did the actual renovation work.
But I do love this one detail, which I hope that people listening, when they go, they will pay attention to, which I guess it's easier to see during the day. But you have this fresco and these lampshades that you had custom designed and painted. Mm-hmm. And they feature some historical figures in this whimsical design. But they also include some modern contemporary figures. What was the thought process behind that, and who are some of the figures?
We definitely like to do, you can't really see a lot of it anymore in Candelaria because, things have unfortunately degraded, and we had to, renovate and things like that, because we built Candelaria especially on a very tight budget, Mary Celeste also. But we always like to have some small details that are maybe not the most intelligent in terms of budget or otherwise, but that really make the place special and stand out. And it's not necessarily in your face, but if you notice, and then it's extra little pleasure of being there. And those frescoes are certainly, as anyone knows, or as anyone has been to Bemelman's Bar in New York, very influenced by Bemelman's Bar, which is a beautiful old place in the Carlisle Hotel uptown. And we were thinking when we were building it that we were missing this kind of, the place has a lot of inherent beauty, but it doesn't have that extra touch of it's when you go to, I don't know, Clown Bar or what's the place in the La Palette in the 6, where you have these super beautiful original details that no one in their right mind would do today, because either they're too fragile or it's too expensive or whatever. So we're okay, let's get a little extra money together and be able to, find some artists and bring them over and to do this kind of detailed frescoes. So we got 2 people from actually Londoners, Harry Darby and Anna Hodgson, who, we communicated a lot with them, and Karina had seen their work before in London, and we brought them over for about a week. We gave them a little bit of inspiration from historical figures of the neighborhood, and
Like
Père Lachaise and the sisters that used to live in the convent up the road that used to exist. Like my dog running around with with Leon, who is Karina's son.
And Léon Blum, right?
Léon Blum also, because Léon, it's like you have Léon Blum there as well. Voltaire and Verlaine, Verlaine lived not too far from there apparently. Voltaire, obviously, French Revolution, but we're right near
Place Voltaire.
What's actually Place Léon Blum?
Oh, that's right. I always say that.
Metro
it's
Voltaire.
Metro Voltaire.
Yeah.
That's right.
But all these historical characters that were around the neighborhood. And so, yeah, they spent the week kind of drawing on that. And then we had all of the lights, lampshades it's something you either have to point out, or one person out of a few hundred that's come by have been like, oh, wow, what's that? But it's, the kind of people that would notice that. And I'm like, oh, of course you notice,
Yeah.
because you're like an artist or a sensitive soul. But they're very small lampshades, but they're all hand painted individually with different scenes. And, the artists were like, oh, do you really want everyone to be different? Or can we just do the same thing for all of them? Like, no, they all have to be different. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or 12, very small lampshades, which are also made by the super old lampshade
dude.
2 women.
Oh, 2 women.
Two older women.
Dudettes.
Down off Bastille that work, in a business that's been there for 100 years making just lampshades, and you have to go, and it's a beautiful place to visit if you ever need a lampshade.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
I need to create a need for a lampshade.
You should get a lampshade just to go there,
and
just
exactly.
to hang out with the women and listen to them bicker between themselves. It's very, very cool experience. So that's a place that Joanna had worked with previously and knew about, but it's not some place you would even find on. It's you can't find it on Google, But they were enthralled by the opportunity to make these lampshades. So they cut out the lampshades for it. We sent them to the artist. The artist painted on them. Then we brought them back, and they made them all up. So
you're keeping their days interesting too.
Exactly. So it's nice to be able to, work with these small artisans and keep that going, small French artisans on different aspects of it. And they love the result. So yeah, in any case, the idea behind investing and taking the time in something like that is to, again, make a place that is we're trying to think on much longer time frames, where we're not trying to, okay, what's Paris missing right now, and let's get it open and do something. Let's jump on a smash burger trend or a pizza thing or whatever. Let's try to just build a solid business that can be around for another 20, 30, 40 years before we're ready to sell it, and keep the heritage of that space, or, maybe in someday it'll be create its own heritage, but at least build the kind of business that
has staying power.
Yeah. And in terms of the space itself, in terms of the offer, in terms of the infrastructure of the space, in terms of financial returns and all these things that are very important for businesses that no one likes to talk about, but there's no point in opening a place that's not profitable, or that can never be profitable.
What's always stunned me are the businesses that open that seem like they were given loans without a viable business plan. And I don't understand why the banks even give out money for some of these things.
Maybe it's not the bank. Maybe it's their family money or their own money or investor money or something like that. But yes,
there's a proliferation of batshit ideas that you see.
Oh, yeah.
Emerging.
And, you can see from a mile away that they're not going to be there in a few years, and it's just going to be, recycled through, and everything will be out the door.
But do you remember before you even opened Candelaria, Paris was a city where not a lot changed, and we all, felt a certain way about that. And now it's gone the opposite direction, to the point where it's become it feels too easy for people to just open things up, and then the turnover is high.
Certainly. And, people always used to be like, oh, it's hard to open a business in France. And some aspects are harder than the US, but in general, the financial barriers are not as high as like in New York, and you also do because of like the way businesses work here, which we're not going to get into now, but it's, banks will lend to a place like a restaurant, whereas like in the US, at least, you need to generally have all of that money be privately raised, and mostly in the UK as well, unless you're already a very successful restaurant person. Like a bank is not going to lend money to a first time or even a second time restaurateur. So you need to have, either your own money or investor money lined up to open a place.
Yeah, here it's very
a little bit
bank driven.
Banks, you need to have some money, but banks will loan to you.
Well, so if we're thinking about you being here, I mean, we've been here almost about the same time, right? Almost 20 years.
Yes, yeah. What year did you get here?
2006, end of 2006.
2008.
Yeah. And you think about how things have changed and how, some things are progressing in a way that we like and some in ways we don't like. What do you think Paris still does very well? And what do you think needs a little work? And this is
in terms of restaurants, or in terms of just like everything?
Let's limit it to F&B.
Well, I do think like that is something different than a place like New York or London, where if you are successful and you make like an institution kind of place, or you're lucky enough or whatever, the stars align to the point where you have like a successful business, you do have a certain amount of protection here that you don't in other countries, where your landlord can't arbitrarily raise your rent to whatever they want. Your lease is pretty much forever. Yeah. And, once you get over, if you took out a bank loan, for example, bank loans here are like 7 years for a business. Once you get over that hump, you're like, and you're in a pretty good spot.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think that, in terms of long-term support of businesses, that definitely helps. And that way you can also, spend the time and energy and money into making kind of a business that can last a long time. It won't be taken out from under your feet.
Right.
Because in New York, like, if you're successful, the landlord's going to raise your rent after 10 years to an unsustainable level. And if you're not successful, you're out of business very quickly, because your rent is already high no matter what. In London, you have these like 5-year rent reviews, upward only rent reviews that are built into every lease, which means that every 5 years you need to get into, like, if you're lucky, a discussion, and for a lot of people, an argument or legal battle every 5 years to, not basically evict you. And so a lot of, you do have long-term institutions, but those are generally the people that own the real estate that they're in. But if you're in a landlord situation, you can never
be sure. Last, yeah.
So,
okay, so that's
in France,
that's a good thing.
That's a very positive thing, I think. And also the fact that because, again, of like this fond de commerce system, it costs a lot of money to get into a space generally, because you're buying an existing business and all of the reputation and
foot traffic,
intangible and tangible things that go along with that. But because that's there, that's why banks lend to you, because they know they have something to take if you're not successful. And B, you're also creating equity and like long-term wealth in that thing, because at some point, if you want to sell it, you'll be able to sell that. And it's not just like you're paying rent and it's just going to the landlord and then the money's out the window. It's, you're not paying to own the space, but you're paying to own the intangible business, which has a value, and that's something you can like retire on later. So, when we bought the space from Regine, she's not like, we had to buy it, and she went and retired to the south of France, So you can
does she own the wall, the walls still?
She owns the walls as well, which is a separate transaction, which we do not own. So she's our landlord, but she also has a vested interest in our success.
Of course.
And she's like, she knows, because she was a restaurant owner, that you have to give someone a reasonable rent and conditions and everything for them to be able to work correctly, or else then they'll
just fail.
Yeah, they're going to fail, and then her space is going to be empty, and it's going to be up to her to pay her loan or whatever. So it's nice if you can be a restaurant owner and then, sell your business at some point, and then be able to actually like retire and have a good life in a moderately successful restaurant, not something that's like, doing millions and millions of turnover a year.
Right. So that's a big positive. Where do you think there's room for improvement in the scene?
I would say just in general, like, because of, the lack of barriers necessarily of making a place, just, I guess, rehashing what we already spoke about. I think that there needs to be, and this is, I mean, it can only, I guess, unless you're going to come in with some weird government policy or whatever, but I don't think that's necessary. Maybe some more self-reflection on the terms for new restaurateurs or even existing restaurateurs, and being like, is this a good business? Is this worth, I don't know. It's hard to say, but
is it
without
worth
sounding
it
like an asshole.
for the neighborhood, right? Like, is it going to change the very spirit of a place?
You know, yeah, I would just say more self-reflection. And
is it less opportunistic business ideas? Surfing on trends that going in are short-lived.
Yeah. Trend surfing, trying to, like make a quick buck in the restaurant industry.
Is that even a thing?
It shouldn't be a thing, I don't think, but I think some people think it's a thing. And maybe showing a little bit more respect for your clients and just being like, okay, am I doing this for the right reasons, or am I doing it just because, like I said, it's just like a business opportunity?
Right. I agree. And also maybe less matcha.
Less macho?
Matcha.
Oh, less matcha, certainly.
Less macho and less matcha.
Less lines,
fewer lines.
Yeah.
The line situation is out of control in this town right now.
Yeah, which never used to happen.
No.
But now it's just because, and I would be shocked and also appalled that if one day like something I was doing became like some TikTok trend, because that's always going to end at some point, and probably quite quickly, and you're going to lose all your real customers because people are waiting in line for your profiteroles or whatever that they're saw online or something that became
I wish it were profiteroles.
Viral, yeah.
I mean, I'd feel honestly less irritated if they were profiteroles that people were lining up for.
Yeah, but that matcha line near Mary Celeste a couple weeks ago is insane.
No, it was 3 days of people getting up at 5 a.m. or getting in line at 5 a.m.
I didn't even know what it was, but then
it was an influence. It was this young woman who is a TikToker who has her own matcha brand that is apparently infused with collagen or some nonsense. And they were there for her as much as they were for this drink. And, your sigh
that's like an obvious, thing. Also, I would say less pop-ups.
Well, we're in pop-up mania right now.
Pop-up, yeah. But it's like pop-up purgatory where you're just like, the things are just like, it's the same thing over and over everywhere. And I understand on one hand the interest of the chefs to do pop-up things because, they're generally decently paid and you don't have to necessarily do all the hard work or the repetitive work of like when you have a full-time job somewhere. So I understand the interest. At the same time, a lot of these places that are based on pop-ups, it's also like semi-legal because half the people that are coming over from overseas, obviously they don't have a work visa to come and work in France.
Right.
So their business is based on an illegal concept, which, that's their choice to open, but I would never do that. And it has an effect on quote unquote real restaurants where it's increasingly difficult to hire. You can't match the salaries, but they're not even salaries that people are getting when they're doing pop-ups because sometimes they're paid in cash. Sometimes they're just paid on a facture. So it's great for the restaurant owner because they don't have to pay any kind of social charges or healthcare or vacation to their whole staff. And the person working, they might see a big fat check after working in a place for 2 weeks, but then they're unemployed for a couple weeks or a month or whatever. And, they're not having their vacations reimbursed or paid for. They're not having any healthcare included and all these other advantages that make France like a pretty decent place if you're an employee. So yes, I would say less pop-ups. Like, there's enough pop-ups. Not every place needs to be a pop-up place. There's a couple places that do it super well. Place like Early June, for example, super nice.
Which is a fixed place and has visiting guest chefs.
Yeah, but not everyone needs to do a pop-up in every random like wine bar or whatever in Paris. I think that's a little bit much. And that's also, it's contributes or is maybe a symptom of trend following. And, I understand a place, they need to like have something to talk about all the time to bring people in or whatever. And, it's just how it goes. But maybe if people like customers were a little less interested in always going to a new thing and, could be become regular. It's pretty nice being a regular in a place. So
I mean,
I
I feel
encourage
that
all
way
your listeners
yeah.
to become regulars in 5 or 10 places. And you get treated nicely. People know your name. You're supporting like local business and jobs and the local economy.
I agree.
Instead of always like, okay, I'm going to go to the new restaurant here. Here's like you read a newsletter. Here's the new 10 places that open in Paris. And like, okay, let's reserve here one day and reserve here another day and reserve here next week. And let's like do every new place that we see in Time Out or whatever every week, which is fine. I like going to new places too, but it's nice going back to the old places.
And that's also what Paris has done quite well, is be a place that people, especially travelers, come back to year after year, and they often go back to the same places. So you want to be able to create businesses that have that longevity.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure like a place like Chez Georges or whatever has the same French people going there for the past 50 years and the same American tourists that every summer when they come to Paris, they always go like twice a week to Chez Georges for a month or whatever. That's great.
Well, now they can go to la Renaissance.
Exactly.
Josh.
Come be regular.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy opening month schedule. And I know it's not been easy, but it's been great to see it shine again.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
That's the show for today. If you're listening on Spotify, be sure to check out the poll related to this episode by scrolling down in your app. There are more exciting conversations to come this season, so I hope you'll subscribe or share the show with a friend if you've been enjoying what you've heard so far. As always, you can find more from me at lindsaytrimuta.com and at the New Paris Dispatch on Substack. À très bientôt.